Good afternoon. Welcome to the News Roundup for Wednesday, September 10th, 2025. I'm your host, Bill Thomas. We have some breaking stories to share with you today, and here's what's happening right now on the big Roundup. And before we get knee-deep into the program, some sad news to share with you. Conservative political activist Charlie Kirk is now dead at the age of 31 after being shot earlier today at a public speaking event at Utah Valley University. Officials now reporting that Kirk was killed with a single gunshot to his neck area and that a person of interest is currently in custody. In case you're not familiar with Kirk, he was the founder of a youth organization known as Turning Point USA, and he leaves behind a wife and 2 young children. Kirk was also close personal friends with President Trump, and American leaders from both sides of the aisle are condemning the act of political violence and in no uncertain terms, calling it a despicable act and saying it has no place in our society. Now, this is a developing news story which is gripping the entire nation, and a story we'll continue to follow very closely. And turning now to a number of additional headlines, which we're also keeping a close watch on here in the News Roundup newsroom. Europe inching closer to all-out war after Poland shoots down a number of Russian drones which entered their airspace. Iran reaching a critical nuclear agreement with the UN's leading atomic watchdog agency. And former Vice President Kamala Harris spilling the beans on President Joe Biden's reckless decision to run for re-election. Also, Elon Musk. He's no longer the world's richest man, and we'll let you know who's replacing him at the top of the list. And a guy with a gambling debt tries to dodge the bill by jumping into the ocean. Yeah, all this and more coming up right now on the big Roundup. We have a great deal to get to today, and we begin with Russia's rapidly escalating air campaign against Ukraine, which is now threatening to draw the entire continent of Europe into all-out war. NATO ally Poland warning that right now Europe is the closest it's been to open conflict since the end of World War II, as just hours ago they were forced to shoot down a number of Russian military attack drones, which they claim deliberately flew deep into their nation's airspace. Now, the Polish military calls the attack unprecedented, saying that a number of NATO fighter jets were forced into action to protect the skies over their nation. As a result of the invasion, Poland's prime minister now invoking Article 4 of the NATO treaty, which calls for an emergency meeting of all 32 members of the alliance whenever a country feels that their security is severely threatened. In the meantime, European Union officials now claim the act was intentionally committed by Russia in order to expand their war against Ukraine. They also say that the incident is a total game changer, that Russian President Vladimir Putin is using it to test the West, and that it's time to hit Moscow with much harder sanctions. One Republican U.S. congressman agrees wholeheartedly, saying the Russian incursion amounts to an act of war and is part of Putin's ongoing campaign of aggression against the entire free world. He's also urging President Trump to respond by hitting Moscow with extreme sanctions that will bankrupt the Russian war machine and arm Ukraine with any weapons they need to strike their enemy. This latest incident occurring only 3 days after Russia launched their largest aerial assault of the entire war against Ukraine, and it's also the first time that NATO planes have been forced to engage with potential threats in Allied airspace. So, the Polish prime minister also says the invasion was not the result of an error, and that for the first time, a whole bunch of these drones came directly from nearby Belarus, a close ally of Russia. Now, for their part, Russia says that their military targeted industrial sites in western Ukraine and that they were not aiming for any targets in Poland. And in the meantime, they're about to begin several days of war games with Belarus, further raising tensions throughout the entire region. Final thoughts, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. If you're watching close enough, Vladimir Putin is, bit by bit and day by day, methodically testing the waters. I'm watching. He's baiting the world to see what everyone can or will do, and so far, any consequences he's been met with appear to be, for the most part, inconsequential. Tariff sanctions and penalties levied against Russia or countries doing business with Russia have had, at best, limited impact. His war against Ukraine rages on, and by some accounts, it's now expanding. His most recent victim is Poland, with his drones violating Polish airspace, and fortunately, those drones were quickly shot down. NATO officials offering their support, that's terrific and pretty much a given, but Russia's war machine is clearly expanding, and shooting down their drones out of Polish airspace airspace, it's just not enough. On the other hand, any response from Poland or any of their allies, that could immediately trigger a global conflict, and one which would not be easy to turn back from. South Carolina Representative Joe Wilson has accurately called the incursion an act of war, and his colleagues in the House should absolutely jump in and support him wholeheartedly. However, urging President Trump to apply sanctions that will bankrupt the Russian war machine while also arming Ukraine with weapons capable of striking Russia, well, it all sounds a bit redundant, right? Sanctions, they haven't worked. Ukraine is armed and fighting back. Russia's war plans appear to be growing, and all free nations need to band together. Come up with a superior game plan aimed at stopping, finally, Vladimir Putin. With that, my pal producer Davey joins us now from the East Coast, from the home base in Washington. Now, Dave, you and I have both been watching these developments very carefully, and in my estimation, the way I see it, the world has changed really in the blink of an eye, and now more of Europe is involved. What's your take?
Yeah, we're standing on a precipice of a very dangerous situation over there in Europe, Bill, and there's no sign that it's getting any better anytime soon.
Yeah, it's a very frightening time. This was something that was talked about during the Biden administration. Joe Biden said repeatedly, we are closer right now than we've ever been to World War III. And I think in a short period of time, we've become even closer to World War III. Are your thoughts and your comments always encouraged? And what are you thinking? Share your thoughts with us. We're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Dave, you're in charge of the email bag. And who do we turn to first?
Okay, Bill, we start off today with Victor, who's writing to us from Boise, Idaho.
Hiya, Vic. Welcome to the program.
And Victor says, make no mistake, we're on the brink of World War III and sanctions are not working. Time to walk the walk, stand by our allies, and put boots on the ground. Semper Fi.
President Trump made it very clear he will not be putting boots on the ground in Ukraine. That's a very touchy subject, but you're spot on. We are that close now to World War III. We are dangling on the precipice of disaster. The Trump administration, all of our European allies, everyone has banded together. Our North American pals, our friends in Canada, over to Australia. Everyone's on board. We're all trying to stop this from pressing forward, but Russia just will not back down. Appreciate you checking in. And Davey, who's up next?
Yeah, Bill, here's Mary Ann writing to us from La Jolla, California.
A lot of folks are for Ginger. I'm for Mary Ann. Mary Ann, welcome to the program. Share your thoughts.
Mary Ann says the president promised to end this nonsense on day one, and now things are escalating and getting worse by the day. When will he learn not to trust Putin?
Yeah, when will he learn? Indeed, I think Putin is playing the president. He's playing the entire world. You know, Russia has designs on moving west. Just watch, just listen, and feel. Use your belly. They have designs on moving further west. Right now, we're just seeing what they can get away with. They're seeing what they can get away with in Poland and just fueling the fire. Russia taking part in war games with neighboring Belarus coming up here in the next several days. Right now, all of Europe should absolutely be on high alert. This doesn't look good. It doesn't pass the smell test. All right, change things up just a bit now. Turn our attention to some encouraging news, which concerns international efforts to curtail Iran's nuclear ambitions. The International Atomic Energy Agency, they're called the IAEA, now saying that a deal has just been reached which will allow the agency to access all of Iran's nuclear facilities. The agreement also requiring Iran to account for all of the enriched nuclear material which has been missing since their sites were attacked by Israel and the U.S. earlier this year. According to the director of the IAEA, the comprehensive deal applies to all of the nuclear-related installations throughout Iran, opening them back up to inspectors by the agency. Also provides a framework for requiring Tehran to report on the precise status of all of their attacked facilities, including the whereabouts of the nuclear material which was formerly present at those sites. Where's the material? The agency's chief goes on to say that the detailed document shows that Iran is ready to begin cooperating with the organization in a respectful way. Since the start of the recent 12-day war between Israel and Iran that happened back in about mid-June, IAEA inspectors, they've been unable to track Iran's stockpile of highly enriched near-weapons-grade uranium. They say that nearly half a ton of the stuff right now, it's unaccounted for, and they call the issue a matter of serious concern. Absolutely. Following the war, Iran's president suspended all cooperation with the agency, which is the UN's nuclear watchdog. Iran also weighing in, they say the agreement takes into consideration their country's security concerns while also spelling out the specific requirements regarding their cooperation with the IAEA. However, they also warned that any hostile act against Iran, such as the reimposition of UN sanctions, could cancel the deal. They're not really in a position to be calling shots right now. In the meantime, France, Germany, the UK as well, all in the process of, in fact, reimposing what they call snapback sanctions on Iran over what they claim is non-compliance with their 2015 nuclear deal. Those three countries saying they're willing to reconsider if Iran changes course and agrees to work with inspectors once again. And final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. This is the way we see it. This is a highly intriguing story, and it makes clear that Iran is fundamentally hamstrung. Put the pieces of the puzzle together. Their nuclear infrastructure, it's been obliterated. President Trump's word. Their economy, it's struggling. It's on life support. And their supreme leader, the esteemed Ayatollah Khamenei, he's pretty much aged out. The big guy, 86 years old, past his prime. He kind of looks decent, but he sounds weak when I've heard him talk. And for Iran to actually survive, they'll need to do what they're doing right now, comply with international inspectors. Iran is actually on the right track. Kind of odd. The world needs to know exactly what remains of that country's nuclear facilities, how much uranium they have, its level of enrichment, and whether or not Iran has the ability to produce nuclear weapons, which nobody is going to stand for. By allowing inspections and cooperating with international authorities, Iran is doing itself a number of favors. They'll possibly avoid further sanctions by the U.S. and several European nations, improved international relations all across the globe, and in time, their economy could reap substantial benefits. Hey, drop us a note with your thoughts or your comments, and we're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. What are you thinking about this one? Davy Cakes to the email bag, and what are folks saying?
Okay, Bill, let's start with Carlos writing to us from Galveston, Texas.
I love me some Galveston. Absolutely. Carlos, what's on your mind, sir?
Carlos says, about that agreement with Iran, I'll believe it when I see it. They're just trying to buy time while they build their nukes to destroy Israel.
I don't think they're trying to buy time at all. I think they are very sincere right now. As I said moments ago, I think Iran is starting to come to that conclusion that they are hamstrung. Their nuclear infrastructure, it's been destroyed. Israel had a hand in that. The U.S. had a hand in that as well. We worked side by side. Iran is no longer the threat that it was just a few months ago. So, no, they're not buying time. They're not going to nuke up. And they know what is in the best interest of their country, and that is complying with inspectors. Watch and see what happens. And Davey, who's next?
Okay, Bill, here's a different view from Darlene in Melbourne, Florida.
Hello, Darlene.
And she says, Iran is all bark and no bite, and they're holding out an olive branch to the entire world. We should take them up on their goodwill gesture and reestablish ties.
Absolutely. Iran right now is all bark and no bite. A lot of the bark is gone. Iran was very recently a threat to Israel. That threat was rapidly, as you recall, extinguished just a few months ago, the 12-day war in June, and to ensure that they can no longer terrorize anyone in their neighborhood. In the Middle East, they've been quieted. They've been shut down. That little corner of the planet right now is much safer than it was just a few short months ago. All right, switch things up now completely, and we'll take a look now at a number of shocking admissions, which former Vice President Kamala Harris is now revealing about herself, as well as her former boss in the White House. I forgot the name of her former boss. Davey, little help.
That would be former President Joe Biden, Bill.
That's the one. Now, in her upcoming memoir, Harris says that her inability to convince then-President Joe Biden not to run for re-election was ultimately an act of complete recklessness. In a stinging rebuke of the former president, she also admits that at the time the stakes were too high for a decision like that to be made by one person alone, and that ultimately it was not a choice which should have been left to an individual's ego or ambition. She goes on to say that while many people were panicking over the state of Biden's obviously declining cognitive abilities, she opted not to speak up about the situation because she calls herself this, a very loyal person. However, she also reveals that her supposed loyalty was not appreciated at all by Biden's staff, claiming that they added fuel to the fire by failing to defend her from any of the withering personal attacks which constantly sprang up all around her. She's starting to sound like a bit of a victim. Poor kid. Harris claims that Biden's jealous staff became increasingly concerned because her popularity began to rival the former president's. Davey, you're trying to tell me they were both had a 20 or 25% approval rating? Is that right?
Well, she claims they were just about on even footing, Bill.
Yeah, 20, 25%. Also says that if she truly believed that the former president was mentally incapacitated, she would have stepped in, and that whenever he stumbled, it was simply because he was a tired 81-year-old man. Additionally, Harris says that on his worst day, Biden was more deeply knowledgeable, more capable of exercising judgment, and more compassionate than President Trump on his best day. Well, she got all three of those things wrong. One former White House official says that in the end, these revelations by Harris basically brings to a close any chance of the former VP making a political comeback in 2028. A final thought. This is the News Roundup Lowdown. Former failed Vice President Kamala Harris never got anything right. She was a terribly ineffective border czar. She mumbled, fumbled, and bumbled her way through every interview she ever did. And if her presidential campaign, Davy, was a diving competition, she would have won a gold medal for best belly flop. However, every dog has its day, and she just hit a home run with a very profound and accurate comment. The former VP now says that the, quote, recklessness of then-President Joe Biden's decision to run for a second term, it should not have been left to an individual's ego. Gee, do you think? She's absolutely correct, but in the best interest of the country and the free world, she should have spoken up much sooner. And in the end, she did not serve the president or the country well. She publicly supported Joe Biden and his ego-driven decision, and knowing full well that he was not prepared to lead the free world, she signed off on his campaign. Bad idea. Now, Mamala, as she's referred to by immediate family, and Davey, you know me, I refer to myself as Mamala's immediate family. She says in the book that, quote, it's Joe and Jill's decision. We all said that like a mantra, she says, as if they'd all been hypnotized. America, there are two things in life you never want. A vice president who is somehow hypnotized, or a failed vice president with dreams of becoming a president in 2028 who is susceptible to being hypnotized. Your thoughts or comments or questions regarding a book which will soon be easy to find in the Barnes & Noble $1 bin. Have at it. You'll find us at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. I'm not beating up on the dollar bin, Davey. I found plenty of good books in that dollar bin. And what are folks saying?
Okay, Bill. We start with Stella, writing to us from Paducah, Kentucky.
I know Paducah, Kentucky, but I don't know Stella. Stella, welcome to the program. State your business.
She says Kamala should give it up already. She's not qualified to lead our country, and after hearing her stab Biden in the back, I'm not sure I'd trust her to keep a secret.
Yeah, that nervous, cackling laugh, if you remember that laugh, you heard that every single day during the campaign, that should be used instead of waterboarding. It's a far more effective method of torture. She accomplished nothing during her term as vice president. You're absolutely right, Stella. Nothing during her term as vice president, which indicates to me that she could in any way assume the role of president of the United States of America. Dick Nixon, Davey, was a fine vice president. He had 2 terms under Ike, President Eisenhower. George H.W. Bush, likewise, a great 2-term vice president, worked under the Reagan administration. Dick Cheney, when he served under 43 for 2 terms, pretty much redefined the vice presidency and did a bang-up job. Now, some additional headlines we are keeping a very close watch on in the News Roundup newsroom. China deepening ties with Moscow and defying U.S. sanctions by ramping up their imports of natural gas from Russia. Think about what you're doing. You're basically aiding Russia in their war against Ukraine. Cuba enduring yet another island-wide energy blackout as the country deals with a rapidly aging electrical grid as well as massive fuel shortages at their nation's failing power plants. Go communism! And scientists at NASA now reporting that their Mars rover Perseverance has just uncovered a sampling of rocks on the red planet, which, check this out, may contain the potential signs of ancient microscopic life. They say that it's the closest we've ever come to discovering life outside our planet and that further analysis is needed before reaching any definite conclusion. All right, switch things up just a bit now. Take a quick glance at a few developing stories which are making headlines today in the world of business. It's a big deal. Oracle founder Larry Ellison, you've heard of him. You've seen that smiling mug of his with the funny mustache and beard. Larry Ellison soaring past Elon Musk to become the world's richest person after the company's booming AI business prompts the value of his stock holdings to skyrocket. And Ellison now worth a staggering $393 billion after picking up more than $100 billion in a single day. Apple unveiling their new lineup of iPhones, including the thinnest and most durable smartphones they've ever made. Make them thinner than a credit card, and maybe I'll buy one. And make them affordable, please. The new models expected to hit store shelves just a week from this Friday, and I cannot wait. And at the Port of Long Beach in Southern California, I've seen these pictures. It's amazing. Some operations temporarily on hold after more than 60 of those massive shipping containers tumble over the side of a recently arrived cargo ship, many of them winding up in the water down below. And officials say the boat came from China, carrying a wide range of products that were on their way to major retailers throughout the U.S. So maybe the iPhones are going to be a little bit late. Got to wait and see. Now time for the lighter side of news, where we take a quick look at a few awe-inspiring stories guaranteed to add a sprinkle of cheer to your life. We all need a sprinkle of cheer. Kick things off today with a bit of welcome news for all the shakers and doers in the Big Apple who simply don't have time to stand on a street corner and try to flag down one of those annoying and expensive taxi cabs. Transportation giant Uber now saying that their clients in the New York City area soon will be able to book their very own helicopter flights directly through the popular ride-hailing app. They say the flights will take their customers to and from a pair of landing pads in Manhattan, both JFK and Newark airports, and even as far away over there as the luxurious Hamptons. They also say that the price is right, claiming that in some cases it might even be cheaper than using their high-end car services. The bold vertical move. I see what you did there, Davey. Helicopters rise vertically. I get that. Well done. The bold vertical move comes as Uber faces mounting competition from a number of highly ambitious rivals, including Amazon's Zoox, which just launched their very first robo-taxi service in Las Vegas. Davey, have you seen the Zoox, the robo-taxi?
I have. They're very interesting. They look like something out of Woody Allen's movie Sleeper.
You're being very gentle. You're being very generous. They're just ugly. They may be very effective, and they may get the job done, but they're the ugliest taxi I've ever seen. Back to the drawing board, you guys. Now, look, Uber got this one right, and even the price for the helicopter taxi sounds kind of reasonable. I think they're saying in the $200 to $250 range. You know, jumping into a helicopter and cruising affordably from one part of New York to another while avoiding rush hour traffic, that's a dream come true. However, you should know that New York is susceptible to thunderstorms, snow, and icing conditions. Helicopters, we don't do well in those conditions, so keep in mind they won't be operating every day of the year. And best guess is they'll only be able to fly on what we call VFR days, the good weather flying days. We actually had a similar service here in Southern California back in the 1980s with a helo service that was shuttling passengers between what is now called the John Wayne Airport and the big airport, LAX. Now, if you're more of a land lover, the Amazon driverless taxi in Vegas, the Zoox, it does sound intriguing, and for now, but not for very much longer, the rides are free. It's an ugly ride, but it's free, so it's A-OK. You will still lose your shirt at the blackjack table, but the ride, Davey, not going to cost you a dime. It's the perfect crime. Now then, speaking of Davey, producer Davey, as you know, I'm not a gambling man, but a free ride does sound like a reasonably safe bet. And what's next on the News Roundup Roulette? What do you got for us?
Okay, Bill, let's roll the dice and hit the high seas for our next story about a very interesting cruise.
I'm sold. Finally today, the story that comes with a bright orange warning label, which reads, "Don't do the crime if you can't do the time." I remember that from the Beretta Show. And never, ever gamble if you can't afford to lose. Come on, man. Authorities are now charging one unlucky guy with a federal crime after he jumped off a Royal Caribbean cruise ship to allegedly avoid paying a whopping $16,700 gambling debt that he owed to the cruise line. The unlucky bettor took his leap of faith by plunging over the top rail of the vessel as it was leaving port in San Juan, as in Puerto Rico. He was eventually rescued and ferried to shore by a passing jet skier, and officials say they finally located the scoundrel near the city's Capitol building, where he was caught red-handed. On his person, $15,000 in cash, a couple of smartphones, and 5 IDs. Ultimately, they charged him with a financial crime that could land him in the joint for up to 5 years, a 5-year prison term. Hey, look, it's Kenny Rogers, the silver-bearded fella, said all them years ago, you got to know when to hold them, you got to know when to fold them, you got to know when to walk away and know when to run. Or in this case, when to take the plunge into the ocean. Sounds like a new version, Davey, of Dine and Dash. Gamble and dash. First rule in life, Davey, the house always wins. Producer Davey, what's the house always do?
The house always wins,
The
Bill.
house always wins. You got to think this thing through. Gambling away your fortunes at the casino, that's a fool's errand, and there are plenty of more worthwhile things to do on a cruise ship. Lounge by the pool, maybe some pickleball, miniature golf, entertainment shows, working out at the gym, and so much more. It's a cruise ship, man. Jumping off a boat into the Caribbean Sea, maybe into the jaws of a great white shark who's kind of hungry, all to avoid paying your bill. That's just dumb. It's just dumb, man. And the guy should have his face plastered on a billboard so the whole world will know he's a deadbeat. And that is a quick look at the lighter side of news. And what say you about man overboard, free taxis in Vegas, or affordable helicopter rides in New York? I like them all, and drop us a note. We're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Davey, who do we go to off the top?
Okay, off the top, Bill, we head to Johnny, writing to us from Astoria, Queens.
Bring it on,
New
Johnny.
York.
Very good,
Yeah.
New York.
Johnny says, it's no shock that helicopter rides are cheaper than Uber. Those jackals keep on raising their prices, and those robo-taxis can't get here soon enough.
Well, the helicopter ride is actually part of Uber, right?
It is, absolutely, yes.
Yeah,
so I don't know
okay.
what he's really thinking.
I'm not sure what he's thinking. So Uber is essentially competing with Uber. You can do it on the ground or do it in the air. Give my druthers. I would take a helicopter ride in a heartbeat. A couple $100 in a helicopter or $110 in an Uber car. It's pretty basic math. Go with the helo. Who's up next?
Okay, here's one from Omar in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Hiya, Omar. What's on your mind today?
Omar says, that cruise ship story doesn't add up. If that guy was such a crook, why did they let him run up such a high gambling bill?
Yeah, I don't know anything about gambling, and I'm sure maybe he put a credit card on file. Although if he had a credit card on file, they could have found the money that way. Either way, the guy did something wrong, tried to dodge a bullet, take a jump off the ship and into the drink. It's a bad idea. He's behind bars, and one way or another, he will pay back that debt to the cruise line. Hey, Davey, one more, and we got to wrap it up.
Okay, Bill, here's one from Maisie in Sioux City, Iowa.
Hello, Maisie. I love me some Iowa. Middle part of the country. It's good living.
And maybe Maisie says, just wondering, did they have gambling on the Love Boat? P.S. Enjoy your show, Bill. Thanks, and keep up the good work.
Thank you very much for enjoying the program. And I don't think they had gambling on the Love Boat. I never recall that. I recall Doc Adam Bricker. I recall the Gopher, Davey. Remember Gopher? And, of course, the cruise director, but I forgot her name. Lauren Twees. Julie was the cruise director, and Captain Stubing. A lot of activities on that boat. A lot of romances were made on that boat, but I never saw any gambling. There were some cocktails. Isaac made up some fine cocktails at the bar, but never noticed any gambling. And now it is time for us to call it a wrap on the Wednesday edition of the Big News Roundup. And before we go, as we do each and every day right here on the program, we share with you a very notable quote. And these profound words come to us today from the legendary Charlie Kirk, who said, "If you believe in something, you need to have the courage to fight for those ideas, not run away from them or try and silence them." Rest in peace, Charlie. You were a great American. And for now, it looks like our time is officially up for today, so please stay safe. Let's all continue to watch out for one another. And we'll ask Engineer Henry now to gently dim the lights. Let's fade to black, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow afternoon.